T-15. T-15 entered D4's tent. The Major General sat alone at his desk.
"Who are you?"
D4 asked without looking up from the piece of parchment he studied. T-15. D4 lifted his gaze.
"What can I help you with, T-15?
A request to be reassigned in marching order. My current position is not suitable.
And why is that?"
T-15 remained silent.
"I asked you a question."
I am concerned that I will become distracted from my duties there. I would prefer an area where my fellow soldiers are less conversational, preferably with soldiers who don't pry so much. D4 reclined in his weather-worn wooden chair and laid the parchment on his desk.
"I understand your sentiment, but now more than ever, we need soldiers with your level of dedication and responsibility heading up the back lines. Besides, if I reassign positions based on personality conflicts, we'd never reach Ikusu, let alone Sovane."
T-15 hadn't been optimistic that D4 would accept the proposal. Having it formally rejected was unfortunate, however.
"I trust that you will learn to adapt to your fellow privates, and perhaps even inspire them to take their positions more seriously. You may even befriend the healing mage's apprentice while you're at it."
I understand, T-15 uttered flatly before leaving the tent. Yet the instructions hadn't been clear. D4's original directions were to avoid the others headed for the Oracle. Now he wants me to befriend Basil? What about the other X-ranks? Should I continue to ignore them? I suppose I ought to, until he provides an update about them. T-15's face became hot, and it was nothing that the magically enhanced armor could prevent. Dealing with T6, T-74, and Basil would be an unforeseen challenge. To relieve the building tension, T-15 embarked on yet another hunting trip, which had become a routine after the contracted hunters continuously returned with slim pickings for lunch and dinner. Despite the losses from the previous day, the remaining soldiers starved. T-15 grabbed a self-designed bow and headed for the wilderness. Sniffing the frosty wind, T-15 couldn't identify a single animal scent. Farther away from camp, a few winter rabbits emerged to nibble on a few hardy sprigs of frost mint. T-15 climbed a tree to prevent the rabbits from being startled when the arrows released. It was a hunting style that had taken multiple bow redesigns and several rotations to perfect, yet it was still challenging to perform. The string looped through rotating gimbals such that multiple arrows could fly in different directions in one draw, and since T-15 wanted all the rabbits, the only way to kill them would be simultaneously. The only breathing came from the white creatures several paces away from the trunk of the tree. Otherwise, the forest was silent. Crisp night air calmed T-15's nerves, and the quiet was a welcome change from the constant babble of Brucite and Teleost. The arrows were ready to release, but moments later, half a dozen additional breaths approached. T-15 cursed silently for taking too long and enjoying the familiar weather. The strangers hid strategically around the clearing to be concealed at the ground level. However, from the tree, T-15 spotted each clearly. Whispers exchanged between the approaching figures, but they were quiet enough to not alarm the rabbits. "Those should lure some out." T-15 barely caught the words. Unsure of what the strangers were hoping to catch, T-15 concealed the bow behind a nearby branch without a sound. The strangers' scents were foreign to T-15. They were not soldiers. After a good deal of waiting, the strangers had not moved. As they calmed themselves, their breaths became harder to detect. Meanwhile, the bait ate away at the greens that struggled to survive above the layer of snow. Familiar breathing entered the farthest of T-15's earshot. The hunters below caught onto his presence as well. "Looks like we'll get lucky on our first try." Like an oaf, T-74 tracked the white rabbits. Turn back! T-15 feared the stranger's intentions for him. T-15 prayed that the rabbits would run before Brucite T-74 was taken by the stranger's trap. Targeting a half-dozen semi-stationary rabbits is one matter, but 6 roaming humans? I dislike those odds. Perhaps after I release the first arrow volley, Brucite can defend himself until I knock another few arrows to slay the remaining ambushers. If the situation proceeded, it would be the only plan. Brucite noticed the animals, but his careful movement came too late. He withdrew a short dagger and crept closer, nearly brushing one of his hidden hunters. T-15 couldn't believe how stupid he was. How does he expect to be fast enough to kill a rabbit with a dagger? At best, he might get one. With the attackers focused on Brucite, T-15 shifted position and knocked enough arrows for each of them, using every finger and thumb on one hand in addition to the bowstring's knocking points to guide each. Special care would have to be taken for the ambusher nearest to Brucite, however, as that arrow had a chance to hit him. As Brucite crept closer, T-15's heart raced. The strangers were moving in, and it took every ounce of sensory and spatial processing capacity T-15 had to maintain alignment of the arrows. It also took every ounce of strength to struggle against the draw weight of the bow's string. If this worked, no one would believe T-15. But then again, several events had already happened on this journey that no one would believe, to include the encounter with the Raven Basilisk and the bewitchment of the bridge. T-15 needed to focus. At last, Brucite threw his dagger and slaughtered a rabbit. The other prey scattered at the sudden movement. T-15 knew it couldn't be helped, but seeing the rabbit scurry away was still demoralizing. As Brucite crept up to collect the rabbit, all 6 figures emerged from their cover at once. He straightened, cautiously alert of their presence.
"Who are you?"
he asked quickly. "Where's your helmet, boy? We're gonna need that," one of them said. In the heartbeat they took to withdraw their weapons, T-15 loosed the 6 arrows. Something stirred within T-15. Preparing to fight those who the arrows had missed, T-15 accounted for all the weapons on hand, several knives, a few poisons, a hair fork, and incendiary material. Yet, there was no need for any of them. Every single attacker lay dead where they had stood. It was a miracle for all 6 arrows to have hit and killed. Did an archangel guide my aim? Brucite remained speechless, but crumpled to his knees, unbelieving of what had passed. "Thank you," he muttered to the air, blind to his savior. T-15 climbed down from the tree behind him, purposely making a noise upon landing to redirect his attention. "It's you," he said before turning. "My silent friend." Instead of responding to Brucite, T-15 gathered the arrows from the skulls in which they had penetrated. At the same time, Brucite collected the rabbit. "Thank you for saving me. I struggle to believe you managed to kill all of them at once. It was incredible. You cannot be merely a T-rank private. I was surely going to die. They had that look in their eyes. Even though it was dark, I could tell. I nearly lost my bowels." "Debt repaid. Tell no one." T-15 spoke succinctly but firmly. It would become a problem if anyone else became aware of what occurred. It was a problem. Brucite had witnessed it, but it wasn't as if T-15 could ensure his silence by killing him. In the fervorous moment right before releasing the arrows, saving Brucite felt crucial. That urge would not leave T-15 so soon. Shock displayed on Brucite's face. "So that's what your voice sounds like. You can speak." He sounded delighted with himself. T-15 growled to shut him up. This was why speaking was a waste of time and a general liability. T-15 did not wish anyone to know anything about who T-15 was. It was safer to remain anonymous. It would be easier to slip off to the Oracle that way. "I do appreciate you saving my life, and I will keep your secret in gratitude. However, I still have to return the favor of setting up my tent that first night." T-15's helmet twisted so fast that it nearly made Brucite flinch. T-15 had meant the maneuver to mean, "Don't you dare," but Brucite didn't take it that way. "I'll think up something good. Don't worry." For nearly experiencing death, he's in an unusually good mood. Perhaps his adrenaline is making him giddy. T-15 prowled back toward camp, and Brucite followed. "So now we've saved both each other's lives. That's crazy, huh? This adventure might be cursed. I wonder what demon or archdemon could be responsible," he rambled. Adventure? I would not consider this an adventure. Then again, the crusade may have been cursed by some archdemon. It could have been possible that the Raven Basilisk I encountered earlier was the archdemoness Coserai. That was her chosen animal, after all, and those legendary beasts allegedly dwell in mountainous caverns, not in the open tundra. Perhaps she had doomed this crusade to death. But why? What could be the point? Had the archdemon aligned herself against her fellow spawn? With the Rhysogli? It doesn't make any sense. Who were they? I can't believe people would want to hurt us. And there were maybe half a dozen of them. Do they disagree with the High King? Did they want to send a message? Maybe they were starving out here. Then again, why would they want my helmet? Brucite said, while T-15 escorted him back to camp. T-15 needed to search the bodies to obtain answers without Brusite getting in the way. Besides, there could be others lurking in the woods, and T-15 had to ensure that Brusite made his way back safely. "I suppose I am talking to myself again," Brusite said. "But after something like that, I can't shut up. I don't know if I'll sleep tonight. Should I report the incident to the Major General? It might be good to post additional guards around the camp." T-15 faced him again. His wide mouth fell into a frown. "Oh, right, I promised I wouldn't tell anyone." "I'll report it," T-15 said shortly. "Okay, I could not live with myself if something happened to someone because I had not taken action." T-15 nodded once. The pair approached a line of tents. "Would you like to warm up by the fire? I'll keep the conversation going for both of us if you want. Or not, whichever you'd prefer." Brusite rested his hand on T-15's armored shoulder. T-15 flinched away from Brusite's hand. In response, T-15's helmet jerked back toward the forest. Brusite's thick eyebrows drew together, crushed by the rejection. "You're going back out there?" T-15 nodded. "Why?" "Food. I recognize that you're a great hunter, but this isn't worth the risk. Let me come with you." T-15's helmet shook. "Nope." "What about filing the report?" Brusite took a step closer to T-15. "Later. Tonight." T-15 hated that Brusite now expected his questions answered every time. I never should have breathed a word to him. T-15 turned to leave, but before running off, commanded, "Stay." Bow still in hand, T-15 raced back through the trees, determined to catch the remaining rabbits, if not more. Upon returning to the clearing with the corpses, T-15 checked the wind to ensure that no one else was around the area. The breeze smelled of the stranger's blood, and no creature shifted in the midnight underbrush. T-15 searched one body after another. There were few possessions, but a sizable collection of gem on the 6 men and women. T-15 had been surprised that there had been women in their murderous group. When looking at the bodies themselves, the same flaming river brand marked various patches of skin along their bodies. Something was wrong, but T-15 couldn't tell what it was. A moment later, the sharp edge of a knife slid in front of T-15's throat and hovered there. T-15 assessed options to escape. "You've been careless, X2," a familiar voice said. T-15 recognized the voice belonged to X1, who was acting under the pretext of a first sergeant with the rank N22. "When you collected your arrows, you didn't even notice that you picked up one of mine." Frantically, T-15 attempted to look at the fletching, but halted to avoid contact with the floating blade. "You don't know whether I am telling the truth, and that proves my point. You let your guard down around a T-ranked soldier. I expect more from you." "You aren't supposed to be talking to me," T-15 said. "This violates the Major General's direct command." "True. But this is a worthwhile encounter. Your hunting trips are not serving your concealment efforts. You're drawing attention to yourself by feeding the other soldiers. Once we clear the edge of Vetron, the climate should improve, and the hired hunters should have no trouble in capturing enough game to supplement the rations." "Hooray!" T-15 growled. "Go away." T-15's blood boiled. N22 would find a knife at his throat in a moment, and unlike his, it would make contact. "Hooray!" N22 said. "No." T-15 had been surprised that N22 knew the language too, but it made sense. The only way N22 could disguise his presence that well was if he had studied with the Carry people. N22 had surpassed T-15 in the art of disguise, but T-15 would never admit it. "Vestringe!" T-15 snarled in the Carrier language. "I will kill you." "Hooray!" N22 repeated. "This habit of yours is dangerous. Do you even know who these people were who tried to kill T-74? Cult members? I don't know. They have brands I don't recognize." T-15 spat from behind the helmet's veil. "They're guild members of the Vahantry. Why are they hunting us?" "That's a question for D4, N22 said. "Since you whined to him once today, I'll let him know what happened here." When T-15 was about to protest, N22 said, "I'll recount your attack. I'm sure he'll be impressed." With a smile in his voice, he withdrew his dagger. T-15 resentfully turned to face him. Just like T-15, he wore the same bronze armor, but his helmet's shield was raised to show his long face. His arrogant grin started to fade once T-15 finally met his midnight eyes. Jasper, or rather N-22, has a point, and his perspective is important to the success of our mission. His methods leave something to be desired, however. N-22 leaned towards T-15's ear to whisper, "You are wise to keep your armor donned." The proximity sent T-15's heart pounding harder than the threat of the Vahantri had. Again, heat built in T-15's face. Retreating from N-22, T-15 asked, "What happens when everyone starves?" "We'll reach the city of Saphai soon. There will be opportunities there for soldiers to fatten themselves up if they want to." "Tell me, where has your limitless gem sprung from? I don't see it flowing from any nearby pools for anyone to stop and collect." "If they can't afford it, then the rations will have to do. That or risk their own necks hunting. Our mission will be difficult enough after losing X5 to the viaduct. We can't be burdened with the whole crusade, and we shouldn't be straying off in case there's an emergency." T-15 hadn't known about X5's death. Still, it mattered little to T-15. "There have already been emergencies. Besides, I don't think that should be a problem for you. You were stalking me just now." He paused. "You know why I'm doing it?" "No, I don't." "In part because I'm required. In part, I'm concerned," N-22 said. "For?" He did not respond. T-15 grew impatient. "I could take any of these soldiers with no trouble at all, and you know that's true. Don't deny it. You saw me kill 6 people at once." "I do worry about multiple," he said. "I'm sure you've heard the rumors. The men we march with are not all upstanding people." "If you have extra time to follow people around, concern yourself with protecting Basil or the other X-ranks, not me." "You don't think I'm not aware of everyone?" T-15 was caught off guard by the comment. "You're watching the 5, or now 4 of us, all the time?" T-15 struggled to grasp how that would be possible. That wasn't a normal ability, even for a mage. "There's a reason I'm X1. However, it helps that you and Basil are usually close to one another. It would simplify the process if you kept it that way." Did D4 change his mind about me befriending Basil because of a request from N-22? T-15 said, "I'm not committing to any promises." "Will you return to camp now?" "After I catch the rabbits," T-15 said, "and I'll keep them for Basil and myself." N-22 raised his dark eyebrows skeptically. "In that case, their burrow is that direction. I'm sure you won't need additional help locating it from there." "Thank you, and I appreciate your perspective." The words were grudging but honest. "Of course, but be careful. More of the Bahantry could be out here," N-22 said. "Wouldn't you know if your hearing is supposedly so sharp?" But T-15 didn't press the issue. With that, T-15 ran off in the direction of the winter rabbit's scent. When N-22 was out of view, T-15 checked the arrows fletching. None of them were N-22s. T-15 smirked. The rabbit tracks ended abruptly. Only smooth snow patches stretched ahead. The creatures could use their long ears to smooth out large sections of snow behind themselves to disguise their direction. T-15 was not surprised by the disappearance. The smell and the wind spoke of what sight could not. Following the scent, T-15 tracked the rabbits to their hollow. They shifted deep within the earth with a false sense of security. Temporarily switching from the bow to incendiaries, T-15 lit a brush by the entrance to their burrow to smoke the rabbits out of the other accesses. T-15 doubted the Chandra had enough resources to support a warren and expected the trick to work. Rabbit after rabbit shot out of the smoking tunnels, and T-15 lit another fire at each aperture until no further motion stirred under the earth. Certain all the rabbits had fled, T-15 stalked through the forest after them. The first few rabbits had no time to hide their tracks and fled without concern of concealment. T-15 hunted down rabbit after rabbit, making facile shots. The later ones had concealed their tracks, but the air didn't lie. After the last arrow pierced an 8th rabbit's head, the hunt concluded. To carry so many creatures, T-15 bled them out to lighten the load, careful to protect the fur. With 8, it was a start for a blanket. T-15 strung them in 2 groups of 4 and carried a bundle in each hand. Between hunting down more rabbits than initially anticipated and making the 6-arrow shot, T-15 couldn't help but feel pleased with herself.